Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Being and Doing podcast, where I'm trying to interview individuals who have interesting stories and bring new perspectives and maybe challenge the views you currently hold in your life. And today with me is a very special person, is Rouzbeh Tavakkoli. And he's a man of many many possibilities, and I'm not even aware which all of them are. I just met him as a person who is a musician, and I know him as a person who is also a psychologist. And I'm sure there are many more things which I will discover tonight. So I'm very curious to get to know Rouzbeh better through the form of this interview. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Alessandra. Thank you for inviting me. And I really like the prologue because I am myself actually exploring more and more sides of who I am and what I'm expressing. And I really find this format of a podcast, I'm always a bit curious beforehand because it's also a method of self-inquiry for myself. I never know what's coming out of my mouth once we start talking and engaging in a dialogue. And for me personally, it's a great way to explore actually hidden sides of myself, to have a conversation like that. So thanks very much for creating this possibility.
And actually, one thing I didn't mention is that tonight we are experimenting. So you mentioned dialogue, and tonight's podcast is going to be a dialogue. So unlike some of the others I have done, Rouzbeh can also ask me questions. So we are going to just see where this takes us. But I will start with the first question I normally start the podcast with, which is, what are the 3 words that you identify yourself with? Not the 3 words, but some 3 words, or even more if you want to.
Spontaneously, I think it's creativity, freedom, and love.
Yeah. I love. Let's start with freedom. What does freedom mean for you?
Well, for me, mainly what freedom is all about is inner freedom. So, of course, there's an outer reflection of the inner freedom, which allows you to make wise life choices beyond conventions and beyond expectations. That is also a viable form of freedom, but it all starts inside. And I am 100% convinced of this basic idea of inside-out transformation. So through the inner freedom, you can then actually realize authentic ways of outer freedom. And the inner freedom, if I should really boil it down to what it is in essence, it's freedom from your own fears. Because I think there are 2 major motivating forces in life. One of them is fear, one of them is love. Fear is a contracting part, is a rejection of life, is a rejection of yourself, is a rejection of possibility. Love is the pro, the yes, the I want, the readiness to live, the gratitude and all of that. And in those 2 polarities, our life basically unfolds or contracts all the time. And the true freedom is to be free of your own fear. And it's a longer discussion how to get there because, there's a bit of a winding road, of course. You cannot just say, hey, fuck off fears, I don't want you anymore. Like, that doesn't work. But the more we liberate ourselves from the fears, mainly the fears of rejection, the fears of failure, the fears of not being a good person and things like that, we can actually live our truth, which will be maybe my word number 4 if I can choose another one. Yeah.
Wow. I just want to share, I did have a session recently with my therapist looking at the fear and embodying the fear and trying to impersonate it. and then talking to it as saying, thank you for protecting me, because the fear is there to protect us, but I don't want to only look at you at this moment. I also want to see the opportunities as well. And I'm just wondering, you mentioned there is a journey through fear, and I feel like it's an unlayering of all the fears that we have gained. Is there something you're willing to share from your journey that was very impactful for you in dealing with the fear or fears?
Oh, for sure. So I think, I mean, you already mentioned that I love doing music now, but it hasn't always been like that. Well, I want to correct myself. It always has been like that, typically under the shower with with myself and my voice. But daring to be on stage or lead singing circles and the things that I dared to do later on was linked to my greatest fear that I could imagine. So that used to be my greatest fear, and the predecessor of that fear was the fear of public speaking. And both of them showed me a road sign towards my greatest wishes and dreams and essential parts of my dharma and my biggest gifts. So I became a professional public speaker, I became a coach, I became a professional facilitator, I became a musician. But first, it started with me having, at the age of 21, some sort of a panic attack, really, in a seminar in university, in a seminar where I felt a lot of pressure because it was in English and my English was not good enough, and it was full of like the elite students of our university. It was a very special club of the best students, and suddenly, really out of nowhere, I can say, I felt this incredible fear rising up in my whole body and paralyzing my whole system. And when I tried to pierce through it with my willpower and I stood up and wanted to say something, I had the first real, I would say it was something like a panic attack where everything contracted and I had tears coming out of my eyes and I couldn't say anything. I was just stuttering, and it was a very, very shameful experience, which then, as it often is now in hindsight, opened a whole new field, because it was at the early times of internet. So I started to like research, like, what the fuck was that? And that was my first entry door into all sorts of the therapeutical things, articles about different kinds of fears and anxiety, phobias, any times of like restlessness inside, and how you can treat it. That was the first time also when I heard about meditation and about mindfulness practices, and that those kind of things can help actually when you experience a state like that, and that breath can be something important. So it took me many years to then actually really, really integrate those things into my life. But that's how my relationship with the fear started. It started by being just exposed to it and then needing to understand what it is. And on a next level, then it took me many, many years actually to understand that the key is acceptance. Like that, as long as I'm fighting against my fears, and the fighting comes from being ashamed of my fears, not wanting to accept them as part of the identity that I have created around myself as a strong and brave man. Maybe it's also something a little bit with a different twist for man. It's very difficult to, whilst we grow up as this young man, there is no support system amongst friends and colleagues and other men which are telling you that it's okay to fear, to feel fear, to feel insecurity, to feel tension, to feel all of these things. It's all about who is the strongest and who is the most successful, basically. So even though I was aware of all these articles about therapy and so on, I didn't even dare to accept it that I'm in need of that. So my primary strategy was more like to just force myself through it and just go again and again with willpower and with a lot of preparation. And in hindsight, there was an interesting element of acceptance to it, because at least I didn't shy away from it. I went again and again and again into the situation where either fear would take over, or the potential of fear taking over was creating some sort of restlessness in me. So it was going into the discomfort. Mm-hmm. And that is something I wasn't even doing that very consciously, but something in me was telling me, you can't run away from your fear. If you start to hide in your closets, that's probably the worst thing that you can do. That was just intuition. So yeah, that was the first roads that I started to take. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing this. The way I see it now, like it was a Pandora box for you, opening like a Pandora box for you. But I think it's opening the Pandora for this conversation, because now my mind is going in all the kind of directions that I would like to take this. But I would like first, I will take a step back and just give an overview of you and your journey in terms of like timeline. Mm-hmm. Where are you from? Where are you now? How did you get there? And what are some of the defining professional characteristics, so that we can have that shared kind of vocabulary, and then we can go back into the questions I had regarding what you just shared.
Well, thank you for asking. I really love it to go a bit into the biography of people. It tells a lot, actually. I'm born in Iran, so that's my origin. That's where my parents are from, and it's actually quite interesting. Like, I'm born in the middle of a revolution. Like when I was seeing the world for the first time, there were like millions of people on the streets of Tehran protesting against the monarchy, against the Shah, who was the king of Iran, and a new regime was coming, which then later turned out to be a horrible regime, the Islamic government. And to make this chapter a little bit short, like, my parents belonged to those people who were then persecuted and had to flee their country together with us children. So I arrived in Germany with my parents at the age of 6. And suddenly I was waking up in this new world. At this time, when I was a child, I was quite nerdy. So my father taught me mathematics because he was very much into science and math and things like that. So I was really good at like calculating and stuff when I was like 5 or 6, which gave me a bit of an interesting advantage in school, because I couldn't speak German, but I was like much better than them in numbers. So there was something they looked up to me, the other kids, and I have actually pretty good memories of the first few years that I had in Germany. But then there was a big twist. Like when I was like 10, 11 years old, this picture of myself, of the good boy, who is also very accommodating and listening well and does everything well and so on, somehow imploded into something else. And the reasons for that are multifolded, but basically I can say that I was grown up in a quite like socially difficult neighborhood. And the other kids who were surrounding me, which were also immigrants' children, basically, with much different family values, they kind of created this external expectation of me. It's like, hey, look at you. You look like us. You come from the Middle East, and like, you're a nerd. You have all these amazing grades and so on. Like, we don't allow that. Like, you have to come on our side, you know. And I really, within a very short time frame, also because there was this danger of being mobbed, I changed my identity and became the crazy rebel. I became this very, very naughty child suddenly. And I was provoking teachers all the time and doing some sort of mess and vandalism and, I don't know, like destroying stuff and la la la. So as a teenager, and that kept on going until basically in different forms until I was 20. So I was a pretty wild teenager. I was a pretty wild teenager, and I'm not saying that out of a sense of pride. I'm more like that's just how it was, and it had like very toxic elements as well. Like I was very early exposed to alcohol and cigarettes, and then later on like drug abuse of all different kinds, and falling like into a very hedonistic life concept where life was like, oh, we just somehow have to like manage school. That's for the parents, you know, for them to be like okay, satisfied. But then basically it's all about the booze and the girls and about doing some some really immature stuff. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, like when I was like around 18, 19, some stuff was happening inside of me. There was an awakening towards philosophy. I remember actually we had a very good philosophy teacher in school, and he opened up like a few very interesting that period where I remember I never liked curiosity the early morning philosophical questions and the deep questions of life really started to arise. Also coincided I was always with, on time. My first psychedelic experience, which was a miracle. With, mushrooms. I was always on time, and I still really always remember. Like, oh, I want to say something about this, and what's consciousness, and what's the difference between our consciousness and the consciousness of animals. Into a period of what like 3 weeks. Where do we come from, and where do we go? You know, like the big questions. Of, like, you have to imagine it was as if like you had your first lucid dream, and extraordinary, all vividly in front of your eyes, and it's like, and that started to read books possible from with the power of consciousness, Kafka, and like going into the mystery of what is this? What does it, you know, say about our potential about it and as human beings? Like, are there any ways to tap into even like some parts of that without it? What's the connection between dreams, between what they are writing about meditation in those books I'm reading from Hermann Hesse about those mystical experiences, and that what I've just experienced. So during that time, I think the foundations were set for everything that was coming after that, and that was this huge curiosity about the workings of the human psyche or the human mind, or however you want to call it. It's like, oh, what is this all about? And I decided that I want to study psychology. And it took me a bit of time until I really got to the point where I was admitted to study, because I wasn't having the best grades in school. So I needed to wait a little bit, and I had to go through some also interesting experiences. So during that time, until I could actually go to the university and study what I wanted, I was working like as a full-time manager for Pizza Hut. You know, like I was like at the age of 18, I was wearing a tie and a shirt, and I was like managing a group of 20, 30 employees, which were, some of them were like double as old as me, you know, or more even, like some of them were 50. And I had to actually really take quite a lot of responsibility for my age, for all the accounting and all the inventory and reporting to the Pizza Hut Central and so on. And at that time, for me, the main driver was I just wanted to earn a lot of money. But in hindsight, I can say that it was quite a endeavor also, like in like accepting this leadership role, actually being responsible for stuff, for money, for all these kind of things, you know. So I was doing that for a while, and affording myself my first bigger travels, which also became a huge passion later in my life. But I always like that part of my curiosity. So there was this inner curiosity, but then also the outer curiosity to venture out and meet new cultures and meet new types of people who inspire me and things like that. So yeah, that was going. And then, yeah, I studied business psychology, organizational psychology, business psychology. And I became, actually, to my own surprise, I became like a really, really good student suddenly. Like I was like, oh, that's possible. If you have actually passion for something, it seems that my brain actually does work. And I really enjoyed, and then I became really focused on becoming a really top level consultant, coach, trainer. So already at that time, I knew that I want to work in the field of human transformation. I was not 100% sure on how exactly, but I knew that like running seminars and workshops and so on is something that I really feel attracted to. And this was kind of confirmed by an experience that I had in university. So I was studying in a huge university in Cologne. And there was the opportunity to become a teacher, like an undergrad teacher. And I accepted this opportunity, and that meant teaching like 100 undergrad students suddenly. So that was my first classroom management experience, was immediately with 100 people in front of me. And it was like, ooh, how is that going to work out? And it actually created this feeling of like, wow, suddenly like being slightly under pressure, I get access to parts of my creativity and parts of my knowledge that I probably would have never have access to. And it was also the first time where I felt like, oh, they are a bit younger than me. Many of them were like having their first semester, so still a bit disoriented at this huge university. And I already at that time, even though this was not precisely my job, I loved it that some of them were like coming after class and asking like for advice. And this was during that time where my inner coach also like awakened. Is like, oh, that's great, I can help those people, and they love to receive my advice, and I can actually be there for them, and give them a bit more orientation and also motivation. It was not only orientation, in those first days in a huge university, you still don't know if you really want that even, and because I was excited myself about the possibilities which open up at this university with all the things that you can do, I was kind of transmitting that to the people I was meeting. So this chapter eventually came to an end. I started my first consulting job. This was actually kind of parallel to my studies. I quickly learned that I'm good with people. I'm good with groups. There's something like, even though sometimes I was still filled with fear myself, it seemed that other people don't even notice that. Like there's something in my presence, in my voice, that gives trust to people. They see me as a sovereign person. And that kind of like reaffirmed myself, like when I was going through experiences where actually my heart was beating in my chest, and I thought like, oh my God, I hope those people don't like notice that, And at the end I felt like, no, everything was fine. It also started to reassure me that I can again and again go into situations where my heart is beating in my chest, and it won't kill me and it won't kill the situation. And so I went deeper into that. But I felt there's still this big curiosity. And before like my big career starts, because at that point I was really still thinking in terms of career. I was also not only driven by purpose and joy, I was also driven by, I want to have a big career. Mm-hmm. And but before doing so, I decided to then go on a 1 year long round the world trip. It was a journey through 12 countries, 1 year. And I really felt like I'm going on this like hero's journey, and I want to explore myself and yeah, gaining some more deep life wisdom before I start my career. And I can say that it worked. That it worked because I fell into my first little crisis during this journey. And without going much into the details, but I think I would call it now a hedonistic crash. Like I suddenly, after like going after more and more like joy and party and socializing and la 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 la, I came to a point where I suddenly realized that I am doing all the things that I'm doing in some way or the other for my own pleasure. And I started to feel deeply guilty about that. And that gave me really sleepless nights. Like I really felt like, am I even a good friend? Am I a good lover? Am I a good person? Like this question really came up. It's like, oh shit, like I'm probably not as good not as good of a person as I thought I am. Like now I'm realizing basically the working of my ego. Like my ego is greedy. My ego is not loving. My ego is also fearful, and I'm hiding stuff. I'm not completely real. I'm trying to show to the world that I am such a such a strong and charming person, but actually you know better. Like you have those fears and you have the insecurities and you have sleepless nights and you have doubts, and you are not that super secure when it comes, for example, also to like women. There are fears that you're having around that. Why do you try to show something else to the world, you know? And these questions, like I think my authentic self started to like push like from inside, like, hey, I wanna get some more space here, guy, man. Like you cannot do that with me anymore, you know. And during that time, but it was putting me into an alarming state of meaninglessness. Suddenly, like everything that I was identified with and I thought I'm good at started to not make much sense anymore. And yeah, I started to again look for solutions. And that was the time where I, for the first time, really started to read more about meditation as a tool, as a like the Buddhist principle of like what is this like mindfulness meditation? What is this all about? And how can you learn it? And so on. And it was in Sydney where all this happened, and I went to a meditation class. And I liked it. I was like, it was a place where I was like with very kind and gentle people, and they were all very accepting and so loving, and uh, it was a completely different atmosphere for me. And I felt this is the first place in my life where the more fragile and vulnerable parts of myself find a space where it's okay. Like these people accept me with all those sides, and I can talk about them with them, and they don't judge me for it, and all of that. And they recommended me that to go to a Chinese monastery, which is close to Sydney, because they're hosting these wonderful Buddhist retreats. And I agreed. And so a few weeks later, after this like crisis, I found myself in a monk's robe in a monastery, and having my first like 1 week experience with all the it was actually a very interesting way of introducing people to Buddhism, because it was quite soft. Even though you would wake up quite early, then you would like just join the chanting of the monks and nuns, and then you would have some mindful breakfast, and they were introducing me to the concept of mindful eating, which was completely new to me. Like I was like typically just eating in front of TV or talking to people, and it's like, oh, like I remember they said like you're chewing everything 30 times. I was like, 1, 2, 3, oh man, that's a really long time. And like a small dish takes like 1 hour until I'm finished, but then actually I'm full after that. So that was something I really remembered as one of those like breakthrough experiences, like conscious eating. But we were also doing Tai Chi. We were having those like Dharma talks in the evening where we can actually like we're sitting in the library and talking about Buddhist teachings of the Buddha and other scholars. And I came out of that retreat like transformed. Like I couldn't believe myself, like what 5 days can do to my system. I came out and I remember I was like sitting in the botanical gardens in Wollongong where it was, and like those parrots, like those colorful parrots of all different kinds were flying around, and I felt a little bit like back into my psychedelic trip.
I
Like,
just wanted to say that it's a
yeah,
psychedelic experience
it
without the
was,
psychedelics.
yeah,
Yes,
it was the
yes.
first psychedelic experience without a psychedelic. The colors were clearly more vivid. I had
Yeah.
goosebumps all the time. I was feeling these like rushes of hormones and happiness and goosebumps and stuff like that. And I was like, oh my God, like what is this? Like I was having like random amazing conversations with like anybody I was meeting, like on a park bench or in a bus or somewhere. So yeah, I got hooked there, you know, by this approach and this practice, and in with all the ups and downs and with all the alterations that it took, then later through the journey of yoga and more like also more dynamic forms of meditation, like conscious dance became a big part later in my life. Conscious movement, somatic experiences, all these type of things, but the interest in mindfulness practice as a vital part of self-actualization and self-inquiry and also self-regulation in like conscious self-leadership and self-regulation, this stayed with me forever. It stayed with me forever, and always also later when I became a full-time coach and facilitator, and I was like, then for many years actually I was my job was to be a consultant, trainer and coach for cultural transformation processes for companies, for teams. So I was doing like team development processes, but also doing a lot of like leadership courses, leadership seminars, coachings, and creating also like the architectures for companies who want to really go through a big transformation. Normally takes like 1.5, 2 years, where like, yeah, you have to create a meaningful system of like you normally you would start with the senior management, and then you have a rollout system, and you have conferences and trainings and all of that for the mindset to really shift from a certain old value system to a new value system, from old habits of how we communicate and collaborate to new ways of communicating and collaborating, and really creating a new culture. And I think that was always like the core element for me. It was like to make work a bit more human, to make work a bit more fitting to our psyche, to how we are as human beings and not as human resources.
Yes.
See, and
wow.
That was my job. You know, I was called into very often very technocratic, engineer-driven, like technical companies, which are just very much basically right brain, analytically cognitive companies, where obviously then when it comes to the human relation part and human motivation and joy and creativity and all of that was lacking, of course, because of over emphasis on the analytical part of our being. So I was always like the guy who was coming in and being the advocate of those qualities. Increasingly throughout my career, and also once I changed jobs into a new company where the founder of the company, he was a philosopher, and he was also a kung fu master, and he was also a psychotherapist, and he was also, which was quite interesting to me, faithful Christian. Like he believed in Jesus Christ, which was for me very irritating. Like I was not connected to the ideas of like world religions. I was also grown up rather in an atheistic household. And then this guy comes across, and he's a fascinating person, an amazing therapist, an amazing coach, an amazing public speaker, a very like fit and charming and creative person, and he believes in Jesus Christ. It was like, wow, what's this all about, you know? But even though he didn't manage to convert me to Christianity, what he was embodying is that we are doing coaching from a vantage point of love and true help,
and
like
faith.
this and faith and
Mm-hmm.
there is a bigger purpose in what we do, and this purpose is love. Like we are here to love our clients. We are here to remind our clients of love. We are here to remind teams to actually love each other and not see each other as like just some resources and people you have to compete with, you know, and compare with all the time. And then all these conflicts and all this pain that comes from this culture, you know, of fear. Then again, this relates back to fear, because there's so much fear in corporations still to that date. There is so much fear, and that's the reason, of course, why the people are suffering from all kinds of psychosomatic disorders and burnouts and depression and anxiety, and all of that comes from the system of fear as opposed to the system of love. Cultures of fear versus cultures of love. And I learned from Philip, and he's not there with us anymore. He actually passed away 2 years ago. But I hold him very, very dear for this inspiration that he brought into my life. It's like a constant reminder that even if you think in terms of success, like also the success of a coach is pretty much determined of how much you can love your clients. Like,
wow, so since now it's a great segue actually, because you mentioned the word success, and the way we started this podcast was actually re-examining and redefining what success means. And then it's a perfect place to ask you the question, what do you think of success as a concept, and what it is for you?
It's a very, very good question. It's a very good question. And well, I think the traditional and often like in our daily language connotated way of defining success has got to do with some sort of achievement. It has got to do with achieving certain goals, and those goals are very often, I call them transactional, you know, like, I mean, it's like either you achieve them or not, and achieving them gives you some sort of acknowledgement that you are a worthy person, or you are, and your prestige and your status is linked to that, of course. And then, of course, the component of wealth and money adds another component, which you can meaningfully use for living with more freedom, to living with more generosity, to live with actually more clarity about what you really want. But very often people accumulate wealth, accumulate success, accumulate their badges, you know, of like, hey, look, like I have achieved so much. Am I worthy of being loved? That is actually the question behind. Most people are not conscious about their pattern, that they're actually seeking love through the outer achievements that they are after, you know. They want to be acknowledged, they want to be seen, they want to be valuable. So this is something many people become enslaved with, but then for many people also I see that like currently it's almost pretty amazing that almost all my clients, they are standing at a certain point where they have had like a lot of success, and naturally the realization arises is like, okay, like, so what now? It seems that I'm still not really happy with myself. It seems that something is missing. There's some sort of like inner emptiness. I cannot even describe it, but I know that I need some help. And and it has got to do with this, like, with my orientation of like next goal, next achievement. Somehow this equation doesn't find a result. And and I think that is then the second big concept that comes in, and that is fulfillment. And so for me in coaching, actually, I really ask this question also to my clients quite regularly, like, what is your definition of success? And I also want to know that from your side. Yeah. As a little in between question, like, so I now already defined success. We haven't gotten fully into what is fulfillment, but how would you describe success from your point of view?
Yeah, I guess the definition changed over time. I guess, so one of the questions I ask people normally, when was the first time you felt successful, and how was the first time that you were introduced to the concept with? And I think for me, when I really felt that I don't understand success, or where I felt that I can achieve something, and how passing and fleeting this feeling of achievement was when I was competing in biology. So I was competing, and I would, and it comes back to what you were saying too, there is really no competition, because I was sitting in a room of 100 people, but the test was me and myself. And no matter how well everyone else or badly would do, if I don't do the best of me, and if the best of me is somehow not enough in this test, then I'm not competing with anyone else, because anyways I have to do my own work. So when I would basically get the prize, or just like have the success or do the good test, I would just realize, well, this is finished now. And exactly the same question always comes. So what next? And it actually made me reflect what was in the process of reaching this place that I really liked. And it made me realize that the process is what made me feel fulfilled, and not the point in time. So I think that was when I was maybe 15. No, well, I started when I was 14. So 14, 15, 16, 17, I was competing in these competitions. And I always felt, and since then, I think I had a slow shifts in what it is. And I became immediately kind of interested in the process. So for me now, basically, it's a process. It's not anymore a badge. It's how am I now, and is that aligned with my values and my authentic self? And if I can answer, and it's a question that is changing, or an answer that is changing, I guess, from a moment to moment. So like, I might feel good, well achieved now, it might change tomorrow, and it means I need to realign. So I'm understanding that this is a constant flow and change and a process. And I guess it's an exploration of how do I live the life with most integrity, aligned with my own values. And if I can achieve that more often than not, I feel successful.
Beautiful. So for you, would you say that a successful day, how would you describe a successful day?
It's another one of my questions.
Really? Okay.
I love that we think alike. I guess I had, let's say before I had my therapy, I would probably define it as something where I kind of had my mind set on something and I was kind of enjoying the process and I kind of fulfilled my own boxes.
Mm-hmm.
After the time and after my therapeutic process, I think what I see as a successful day is a day where I was in tune with my inner and outer self. So when I respected what comes from the inside, I didn't neglect that, and where I also was able to respond to the environment in a way that is nurturing, not only for me, but also for the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be in relationships, that can be in work, it can be in these conversations. So I feel what I'm transitioning more to now is really having a constant check in and check out, and being more centered that these things don't take as much time as they were taking before.
Mm-hmm.
That I can do that with more flexibility and ease, let's put it like this. Mm-hmm. So I would say a successful day is any day from now on, basically.
I really like that perspective, because it also really it defines success more in an inner way, which is revolutionary, basically. As I think in 99% of people, if you would ask them, they define success by something external. And they would not define it by the number of check-ins that you're having with yourself or anything like that. So I really like that definition. And I think here you can really see that it's semantics, right? Like, I think yes. the success that you're describing, probably other people would then rather call a deeper fulfillment or an inner growth or whatever that is. And I mean, words are always just labels. Yes. And they're evolving over time. I think people 500 years ago, they would have defined success differently than today. But I also think that the greatest success is to be yourself and express that to the world in a way that even leaves some traces of love.
That's what I wanted to say. Yeah, it's really living from a place of love.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, because it's really a very, very important complementation, because you can. I know that very often I thought a successful day is a day where I was daring, where I was courageous, where I did something that would scare me, where I jumped. In German, they say where I jumped over my shadow. But is that enough, or is that also still a quite self-centered approach, that is all about me and my courage and but how about the world? Like, is anybody benefiting from my courage? And I think if you bring those two elements together, then it's powerful, and it leads to a more sustainable sense of fulfillment, because luckily we are wired that way, that when we create happiness in others, when we actually allow other people to benefit from our love, this recycles back into our system, and we really deeply enjoy giving. It's
and actually I had another kind of thought while you were talking before, but now you reminded me. It's bringing the whole of experience. And some days we are daring, and it's beautiful to be daring and brave and being able to do hard things. I was just listening to a talk of the people who have developed the Oxford vaccine, the AstraZeneca vaccine. They've done in 5 months something that 5 years would be the timeline before. And they were actually making these decisions even before the government was on board. They didn't know whether they would have funding. And it's incredible to see that people are daring. But then daring is not the only way to be. There are days where we are fragile, and being fragile is daring as well. So I think you were talking about masculinity and kind of what kind of fixed values are attributed to it. I feel that's something that I think is success, is making a whole, and not, I read somewhere that life is not a problem we need to solve, it's a set of paradoxes that we need to manage. So you, even in your wording, when you said like, oh, I realized this is a problem and I went to solve it, and then I use mindfulness, sometimes I feel like we are fighting life as if it's a problem, and actually it's an experience, and it's majestic. We are kind of given this experience to open our eyes, to have this consciousness, to embody these bodies, and to just be here now. So yeah, I find that actually just looking at life from that place of love is success. And it's kind of, it's so simple, but we need to go through all this. So we are first simple, then we go through this amazing complexity, and then we come and we say the same sentence in the beginning and at the end. But when we say it at the end, it feels different. We know what it means to live from a place of love. While here, it's only like an empty sentence, I feel. I don't know what you think about this, but...
Well, there were many different, very inspiring elements in what you said, because I think another thing is that even such a profound thing as fulfillment, where you can basically agree and say, of course, we all humans seek fulfillment, and it's definitely better to seek fulfillment rather than some like external measure of success, which is very monetary or something like that, But fulfillment can become a very clear goal.
Yes.
And then I by having commuted a lot, like in conscious communities and in places where a lot of people, like spiritual seekers, are looking for answers, like in Ubud where we met. You see that there is this self-development craze going on, where people become insatiable with personal development, and they seek, like in all sorts of like workshops and teacher trainings and retreats and anything that they can find, this becomes a new habit of never actually arriving at this space, and chasing this vague, elusive state of fulfillment, which will of course never actually be reached. That is a particular thing about self-actualization, that is like endless. It's ever unfolding, like the lotus flower, as they say in Buddhism, with 1,000 petals. It keeps on unfolding. And so if you make it this your goal, to achieve enlightenment, basically, to achieve like full self-integration, full authenticity, full freedom, the complete liberation from all fears, you're creating a massive new problem, basically, in your life. And that is a constant nagging dissatisfaction of not being as perfect as you want to be. So, and that is a very tricky thing. And many scholars, like spiritual teachers, have actually spoken about that part as well. Is like that. This is a trap you can fall into when you're a seeker. And I sometimes have to, like, when my clients, it depends on where they stand, but some clients, they really first need to like wake up to the full scope of what fulfillment means. Some people, some other clients, they are actually exactly at that point where I need to remind them of letting go a little bit of their ambition and their hurry and their restlessness in their personal development. And more accepting, as you say, the experience itself, accepting also their little shortcomings, accepting fear, accepting imperfection, accepting that certain things cannot be forced and cannot be read in a book, and we just need to like humble ourselves to life and accept difficulties and all of that. So that is actually a tremendously important part of personal development, is to also see the limitations of personal development and accept them and love yourself through all of this. And that is not easy, but at the end, I mean, we're talking about love, and it sounds so cliche, but it's so true at the same time. Love is something that is deeply anchored in your self-love. And self-love is closely related to self-acceptance. And over-ambition to change something opposes self-acceptance. So here is one of those huge paradoxes that we're having also we're now living in a period where like 1 million online courses are promising you salvation and ultimate happiness, basically, and it's a quite tricky door to enter.
I mean, in Gestalt therapy, or I had this discussion with my therapist, so they even call these things like spiritual bypassing, when you are actually bypassing looking at what you actually need to be looking at and staying with in your experience, and just constantly looking away and kind of bypassing what you just need to look in. And then another thing in Gestalt therapy is we actually call the paradoxical theory of change. It's only when we don't want to change something that change happens. And so I understand. I mean, I understand it. I embody it. I don't understand it. I know how many times I tried to force something and it did not happen. And then suddenly when you just become a change, like kind of amazed with what is, then things start to unfold. But I actually had another thing which really inspired me in your discussion, in your explanation of your journey, which is this experience of being a refugee or being in a different country, with not speaking your language and keeping the values. And I experienced that a lot in Serbian communities, which are in different countries in the world, where suddenly we bring those same values and we don't want to give them up. And you mentioned that this is what happened to you in the community you were part of. So I'm just curious. I feel that this is done to preserve something which is for us very difficult to give up, because we lost so much already. And if kind of losing this identity, it would be like completely losing ourselves. But I'm also like, there's something is really interesting, because I was reading Hesse and Kafka, and
really?
It feels like it feels like it seems like it's an inevitable thing on every teenager's teenager's path.
Not on every, I tell you. I've spoken to some other certain.
It's really funny. It's like it's exactly these novels, like the way, like the Kafkian neurosis, or like, the incredible Hesse, who is constantly kind of describing the polarities within himself, and I was just amazed by it. So it was really funny to see that, we grew up. And I always find it fascinating that we grew up in this very, different ways. but not so different, because I was born in a country that just fell apart. I even now sometimes think of myself like as an intellectual refugee, because with the values that remained after this big impact, it's something that I could never align myself with anymore. And it's very difficult. So it's really interesting to me to see that, that very different destinies kind of have very similar outcomes, just because we are human and we share this basic biology.
Oh, yeah. And Alexandra, I really deeply believe in this theory that there are some like separating factors, and this is like when we go on the level of like opinions, interests, likes and dislikes, and all that kind of stuff. We can always find a lot of differences, and that is basically still the mechanism of the ego, which wants to differentiate itself. It has this need for a distinct identification of like, I am separate from all the other entities in this world. I am actually not connected to Mother Nature. I'm not connected to these other beings. And here I am, and I want to show to the world that I'm very special and I'm different, And then there's this other part, and we can call it essential self or higher self or God self or whatever. And in that we are very similar. We have the same awareness. If you would see this more from a point of view of like, oh, this is an entity which is looking at which is observing our breath, the body, what's happening in the mind, the thoughts, and our patterns, and also our own evolution and our fears and our ability to love and what makes us sad. And so from that point of view, we are really one. I share the same exact structure like a Inuit in the northern parts of Canada, or a tribesman of the Maasai, or it's like we are really one. And maybe one level, let's say, less abstract, we all also are after the same basic values, like are the most truthful part of ourselves. All of us, we seek truth, we seek freedom, we seek love, we seek connection. And sometimes it's a bit like overshadowed by other needs or values, but like deep down, we all move towards those kind of things. We just have very different ways of expressing that, So some people have very hostile ways, for example, to express their need for love, and they act out, or they go into conflict to test if they get the love, and they show aggression to see if they are worthy of love or not. There are many very, very complicated patterns of like how we behave and why we behave the way we do, and what is behind that, the basic need that we're having. But yeah, I totally believe that we share very similar basic human needs, and that we share one consciousness, one form of consciousness, and that binds us together. And even on a very practical level, also it shows that what you mentioned, these national culture systems, they are not even a very good indicator for differences between humans. So it shows that, for example, a PhD biologist from China and a PhD biologist from the United States or from Serbia have more in common than, let's say, a comedian or an engineer in Germany. Yeah. See what I mean? Like two very different types of profession or vocation. They have normally much more difference within one country than the same profession across countries. So there is something more about like basic temperaments. Like there is a reason why you were drawn towards Kafka.
Yes.
And the same deep inner reasons were drawing me towards Kafka.
Yes.
And in other cultures, maybe there's another writer. I mean, in Japan, maybe is what's the name of this guy? They call him the Japanese Kafka.
Murakami.
Murakami,
He's my
exactly.
favorite. I love him.
Yeah, yeah. So again, very different culture, very different mindset. But some people there are drawn towards the same energy and deep, basic, intuitive mood of like finding meaning in life.
Yes, yes, yes. And there's one more thing which, again, is a very interesting topic for me, and I explored it a lot, is masculinity. And actually, how much we equalize men and masculinity, and we don't bring the whole, because both men and women have masculinity and femininity inside, and it's about accessing and understanding both parts. And what I really like about you is that you're someone who comes across as someone who is in touch with, as you mentioned, with the vulnerabilities, with the gentleness, with the embodied part, but also very driven, also someone who is capable to be very focused, very oriented, very to the point when necessary. And that's fluidity is to me a sign of an integrated human, not man, not woman, but a human. So I'm curious what your journey towards that was, because as you mentioned, men don't have much support to explore much more than the several very narrow values that are given to them by birth.
Wow, it's a very profound question. It's a very profound question that we could fill a whole podcast.
I know.
Just with that, because it reaches into aspects also of polarity, which then also in tantric philosophy and tantric practice have, of course, also interrelations to sexuality and romance and all of that. So it's a huge field we're talking about. But if you try to simplify it a little bit, yes, we have this basic. It's one of the basic polarities in this universe. It's also the yin and yang. Everybody knows this yin and yang symbol. And it is actually a profound symbol because, as you see, like so in this white part, there is also a black dot, and in the black part there is a white dot. So it tells already, and it is in harmony with each other, and through the harmony, through the integratedness of both sides, which contain always a seed of the other side. This whole thing comes into a dynamic form of fluid movement, basically. And I think that's a beautiful metaphor for those two energies you're talking about. It's like if you are very much identified with a masculine energy, which rightly so doesn't mean that this needs to flow only in men. All women have the masculine force of assertiveness, pure presence, wanting, achieving, clarity, and all of that. They, of course,
it's incredible. While you're talking this in your body language, I'm like, this is me. You're just describing me. It's like I can do that.
For sure you can. For sure you can. And I would say that 100% of all women have demonstrated that in their lives to a certain degree. It's just you have all the full spectrum, of course, and the same is true, of course, with all men. In some situations, of course, we have to surrender. We have to be soft. We have to be receptive. Just the quality of listening, just the quality of letting go. In any situation, is a feminine act. Any form of like joyful movement, creative expression is a feminine quality in that terminology that we're using there. So I would say in some way or the other, we always play with both polarities inside, but of course there is a societal bias, and that is that the world expects man to be more masculine, and they get more positive feedback for their masculine traits of like getting their shit together and rocking their business and being like super brave and super like durable and resilient and strong and all of that, which then creates a shadow, which is another concept that we could talk for a whole episode about, but which creates a shadow around your weakness and around your vulnerability and around the qualities which are considered to be feminine. Like these are parts you would, the tendency is that you don't want to accept those parts around yourself. So you either suppress it or repress it or cut it out, or you create shame around it or something like that. And then during the journey of becoming a whole integrated being, hopefully you will receive the chance to look at those parts and gradually integrate them and accept them as part of your being. And not only that, even actually see what kind of treasures they are. Like all the parts which we have, like the deeper you have dig those parts, you can look at it like it just comes now to my mind is like diamonds are being created under pressure, right? And now you have to imagine like there are those like parts of yourself which you have digged so deep into the ground, they have been pressured and have become diamonds, and now you have to actually like go down there with like this heavy machine. The heavy machine is your maybe your therapeutical toolbox or your spiritual toolbox or whatever it is. And when you find them, these are treasures. These are gems, and you can really use it also to liberate other people. You know, because like for me, for example, the qualities that I have found in this field, also in music especially, you know, like in this particular way of chanting, meditative music is a very feminine thing actually also to allow that vulnerability and this tenderness with your voice and all of that. And it became a huge gift that I can share with the world, because also it comes from such an unexpected place, you know. If a very angel-like feminine figure is chanting mantra, it has got a certain effect which is probably more expected, and it draws a certain type of people. When I was doing that in Ubud, suddenly like big man, like I remember once there was this like Russian like bodybuilder, like he had a biceps like the size of my legs, you know, and he was coming to my chanting circle. And probably it was because I was transporting that in my male body. And for him, a certain taboo was being dissolved by like, oh, okay, so if this guy is running the circle, I don't need to be ashamed to be part of that, you know, because it seems that he's okay with his feminine like side. So I can be maybe also more okay with my feminine side, you know. And the other side from a feminine point of view is equally true and equally profound. I think probably you can share a little bit more from a female point of view, like what it means to accept and integrate your masculine parts. And I think like this female empowerment movement that is also pretty much happening like the last years in a wider scale is just a counterpart of what I was just describing, right?
So that's a very interesting thing that unlike, well, different females that have their different journeys, but my journey was to integrate my femininity, and that was a big surprise for me. That I was very much adopting the male patriarchal, however you want to call them, values. And I was really in need for the gentle, the vulnerable, and even you were talking about music, and I recently started talking with a friend who is a jazz singer, and we are talking about voice, and the way I was singing was very masculine, from the chest voice. I don't know how to use my head voice. I don't know how to be gentle.
So interesting,
and I started to realize that I was. It's I would call it a real mind fuck what happens to females born in patriarchal societies, or let's call it homes with patriarchal values, because a whole society is very too variable. I was born in a home which had very patriarchal values, and basically what happens is I was disconnected from my body. And that's another bad wording, because we are bodies, but suddenly we make this cut. And literally that cut has happened inside of me. And as I said, the way it was an awakening, a constant unfolding, let's call it like this. And it was always like a layer and layer was melting and melting and melting and melting. But I think now externalizing the abuser that was inside of me, having it really outside in a physical form, was really, I think, the biggest impact in showing me how much do I abuse myself with things that are the shoulds, and how we should do something, and the musts, and the checklists, and what should I have until I'm 35, and I'm getting married just because that's what's most important for a woman in my society, and all these kind of things that I was just seeing and normalizing and not questioning. Suddenly they came at me with such a force that I had to unpack them and come into that gentleness and be like, well, today I might not going to be efficient, but I will efficiently cry, because that's efficiency as well. So so it's been an interesting journey, and I guess it's different for different women, but for me, I would say paradoxically, I had to look at my femininity and bring it to myself.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. And there is one important difference between femininity and masculinity, and that is, and I would say that this thesis is deserved, and that is that most of the societies of the West are rather masculine driven.
Yeah.
The whole corporate system is masculine driven.
Yeah.
And then also many family systems rather. This is what you know. There are of course family systems which are like more like artists' families and so on. They are naturally more connected to the feminine qualities. And sometimes I have met men in men's circles which have exactly this situation, that they are not connected with their masculinity, for example, because they were raised only by their mom, and their mom was maybe a hippie artist person, and they never learned from a masculine role model what it means to actually take responsibility for your life and achieve stuff and be tenacious and things like that, you know. So I see that the suffering from women, there is a violation to the basic nature of a woman. So here comes a theory which is a bit confronting, but I believe in it. Like when I read it, for me it held truth. And that is that, of course, we both genders have both energies inside, and we need to work on both areas. And it's also like, you cannot say that, oh, my task is only to integrate my feminine or my masculine. It has got many nuances over the course of time. We have to all the time like maneuver and see like, oh, now it's more the feminine in that particular situation, but then maybe in your job you run into a situation where it actually needs a lot of discipline, and you have to like reawaken consciously your masculine power or whatever. But there is also something that David Data, he explains it very well in his books, and that is that there is a primary energy and there's secondary energy, and the primary energy in women is normally the feminine. There are exceptions. There are like some women which also have different sexual orientations, which have a different nature. But for, let's say, 80%, just for simplicity, 80% of women have the feminine energy as their primary energy, and the masculine as a secondary, and for men it's the other way around. And that means that in other terms, if you violate constantly your feminine energy, you will have serious difficulties with fulfillment, with feeling that your life is going well. So that is actually what happens to many strongly career and goal-driven women. They go after the career, they achieve everything, they toughen up, they want to compete with a man, and so on. And at some stage, they feel like, oh gosh, like I'm totally disconnected to something very essential to what it is to be a woman. I don't know how to move my body. I don't know how to be. I don't know how to be receptive. I don't know how to love my man. I don't know how to be with other women. I don't know, like, to deeply nourish and give and pay attention to aesthetics, like beautiful feminine energies. You know, you get disconnected from it through a society that induces masculine values into your system. Yes. And then those women, they seek healing in formats and places which help them to reconnect with their femininity, and I think it's really needed.
This is exactly what happened to me. So, for example, a very, very basic example is I just love to dress well. It's something that I always loved, and I have like a full closet, like the prototypical Sex and the City wants. And it's like, and my whole life I was looking up to women who can, how, like, you know, they can be so simple, and, you know, the Steve Jobs, they can wear only one black, you know, thing, and it's like, I must be not dedicated enough, I must be not something enough, you know. I was constantly punishing myself of like, yeah, I'm not going to buy this anymore because I don't need clothes, and this is, you know. And at some point my therapist just mentioned this to me. She was like, oh, I see you as a very aesthetic person, I really like the way you dress. And it was as if someone just liberated me. It was just like I was constantly wanting to be something I wasn't, you know. And also sometimes like just like putting makeup on or just taking care of, you know, just that aesthetic part was something I was punishing myself for. Or entering a room and feeling well and being sexualized, it was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't dress like this, otherwise, you know, I wouldn't be sexualized. So maybe I should just not be a woman so that I'm not raped or something like this, you know. So there were so many things that's exactly what you described. And I like the word you used, violation. I haven't noticed this violation happening until I went to my healing process,
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously ongoing and it will continue forever probably.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very liberating when we get to a point of being who we are in our femininity or masculinity and trying to still understand each other and have that conversation. It's again this being one and differentiating at the same time, kind of thing.
I mean, your podcast is called being doing.
Yes.
How's it exactly called again?
Being and doing, yes.
Being and doing, yeah. And you know, one way of looking at it is being is a feminine quality, and doing is a male quality. And I think we both, men and women, we don't really get a proper education around how to be. We get socialized to do, and there's good reason, because we should be like functional parts of this economical system, you know, and just being doesn't much contribute to the GDP, you know. So in those places where people seek healing, men and women alike are very much trying to connect with their feminine quality. It's like, and it's a real reprogramming process to move from like detaching from the need of doing something all the time is a big one. Like, how do you deal with doing nothing, for example? You know, it's like, it's not even a concept for most people who are like in the treadmill of career, and it's like nothing. Like, at least I have to like efficiently meditate, you know. But I recently I saw a little printout in a bathroom, and it said the school of nothing. I really liked it. The school of nothing. And it's probably one of the most difficult teachings. This like just be, just stare on nature and just being content. Just be music, not do music. It's something I'm still a beginner with, you know. Like I love it, like when it just happens that I am music, like in a like when I'm doing music with others, and then at some point, and that is also the very special thing about mantra, and that is that at the beginning everybody's doing mantra. But then it's because the mantra is so repetitive and it's just designed in a way that your mind at some point like starts to give up. It's like, you know, the mind is programmed on novelty. Yes. And at some stage, like the mind says, like, that's just boring. Like I don't need to pay attention to that anymore. It's like saying all the time Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Like, why should I pay attention to that? And then when if you're lucky, like you get more into a space of being, because the mind starts to give up, and you just are the mantra. And that is where profound healing happens. That's where profound connection happens, because that's where then we are not a group of people doing mantra and trying to maybe be better than the other, or we fear that the other one is a better singer, or I'm slightly out of rhythm, or like this is the game of the mind. Yeah. And then from a space of just being, from pure awareness, we are floating in an acoustic landscape, and we are there just together, and we are together. We're communicating with a new language of sound, you know, and it's so deeply connecting. Like people fall into each other's arms, like after the singing circle, just like because you were just sitting beside your neighbor, and you feel like you're so connected to that person because you were singing next to each other for an hour. And those type of things then happen, and this is a feminine quality, which is which is right now in the world what brings healing, because we have had a bias towards the masculine qualities for centuries, basically since the start of the industrial age, and also the Enlightenment, like philosophically from the epoch of Enlightenment, this like era of like science and like progress and achievement and enlightenment, and then with all the good parts also, it has brought this like masculine bias, and both genders are healing from it. At the same time, I think probably there is even a bigger violation to the women, because it's even less in accordance with their basic nature and their motherly qualities, basically, and I think it would be.
Yeah, I find it so while you're talking about this, music comes a lot, and actually the voice, and you talked a little bit about this, but I want to explore it a little bit more, which is I'm realizing how much the voice is actually the carrier of our authentic self, and how much it's influenced by everything we are, but by every like tensed muscle in our body, and by every fear. And for me, I would love to hear your journey with your voice, because I had experienced a moment where a person would tell me, "Oh, can you speak louder? I don't hear you." And in my head, I'm really loud. But that made me realize that I have given up on my voice because of my family circumstances, the country I was living in, and all the layers of conditioning. And I'm very curious for the people who are listening, how was your path of liberating your voice happening? Another podcast.
Another podcast. No, but I'm really grateful for this question. Well, first of all, one part of the answer is that it's still unfolding, this liberation process, and as the voice, as you rightfully said, is something so elemental in our being, so foundational and so holistically connected to our whole being. Like it's I mean, when you start to really think about it, it's like, first of all, the voice is the breath. So it's it's an exhalation plus something that you do with your body, or especially also with your vocal cords. But it's like, or you can do it's one-on-one, like connected with the breath. It's inseparable. And the breath, as we know, is kind of like the gatekeeper between body, mind, and spirit. Like this is the thing where like when our emotions, they influence our breath. At the same time, our breath also can calm our body down when we consciously use breath. Like, for example, in yoga, or just sitting down in the morning and breathing calmly for a few minutes has tremendous effect on your whole hormone system, on your whole tension in your body, and so on. So the breath is something very, very essential, and it's this kind of the spirit that is moving between body and your mind. And then the voice brings in even more subtle flavor to it, and it's unique. We recognize people by their voice, and it is a carrier of emotions. It is basically our maybe our primary instrument to give full expression to the emotions, from like enthusiasm, like, when we're like into it, we're like, Wah! Like the voice does intuitively crazy things with strong emotions. When we cry, when we grieve, what is it? Again, the voice is dominant. It's like this is the instrument. Fear contracts our voice. Our voice gets shaky and fragile, and sometimes completely quits. Doesn't want to come out at all anymore, you know. And children with severe trauma sometimes stop speaking completely for many years, you know. So this just as a little introduction, like of like how fundamental really the voice is, and many people are not consciously aware of it. It's like they feel like, oh, there's something about my voice, but then many people have never worked on their voice, which is, you know, like it's almost as if like you have never done any exercise with your body. It's equally unconscious then to you. You don't know how your muscles work. You don't know how your joints are located. And with the voice is when once you start exploring the voice, you see that it's a whole like inner anatomy connected to the voice. And there is a whole inner psychology of all your fears and all your desires and all your emotions also connected to your voice. And working on yourself will have some reflections in your voice. Like when you actually go, for example, through therapy, or you have gone through a beautiful process in a retreat, which has been very liberating, and you have danced a lot and you have cried a lot and you have connected with your truth and you have connected with other beautiful beings. There is something in a subtle quality of your voice that represents this state of like inner peace. Automatically, you're not thinking about it, but it's just reflected in your voice. And the other people, they feel it again on a subconscious level. Like we feel in the voice of a person, we feel a lot. We fall in love even with the voice of somebody. There are countless experiences of people listening to somebody in the radio and having a lot of like romantic fantasies just because of that voice, because it transports like a deep warmth of a deep inner alignment or mischievousness or whatever. It transports so much. And my personal journey was that, it seems that like I was gifted by nature with a quite strong, loud voice. And when I was a teenager, like it started that like random people would give me a comment about my voice. Is like, hey, your voice is really loud, or like your voice is really manly. You're like Barry White. And do you maybe like do some dubbing for movies? And like maybe you should do that. You know, you should dub movies and stuff like that. You know. And so that is one part where I like increasingly like this happened again and again and again. Like people would like comment on my voice. And beside that, there was another thing, and that is that singing was actually my first truly independently chosen passion. And that was like around the age of, I think, 9 or 10. And during that time, the music channels in TV, like MTV, started to broadcast. And I remember, like, for me, this was like a whole new world opening to me, like all these music clips. And I started to record them all and listen to them on my Walkman that I had just got for birthday, you know. And then I had this cassette recorder and player, and I would record my voice, and I would like try to like sing those songs like from like Whitney Houston or I don't know, like different stuff, you know. And of course, completely wrong because I didn't know the lyrics, and it was before the times of internet where you could just look up the lyrics. You know, I was just singing some random bullshit English words. but I was truly passionate about it. It was like something where I lost sense of space and time, you know, and I was just for hours like record voice and blah blah blah. And then I remember this like experience. I think I was like 12 years old, and I wanted to sing something in front of my friends, and they all laughed at me. And this is again connecting a little bit to this like male thing, like all these other like 12 13 year old like male dudes, all teenagers, like for them like me singing was something, at least in our group it was like something very like shameful, or I don't know, it was just stupid, you know. There was no room for that, and they all laughed at me, and I was like, oh okay, shit, like but better don't do that anymore, like in our cool gang, like it's not appropriate here. And but then, you know, like throughout my teenage years there were again and again situations where, for example, when I was having a few drinks, or like even some other intoxications, you know, my deep desire to sing would come out, and I would just sing on the streets, or like I would just like then take my space and sing, even though they would all like judge me for it. I would just sing, you know. And when I was doing that, there were moments of liberation where I felt like now like I'm singing actually from a place of like love, and I wouldn't call it love at that point, but it was fearlessness. I'm free enough, maybe because of the intoxication, I'm free enough to sing, and wow, like my voice actually sounds good when I'm singing like that. And the moment I get self-conscious and I see the reactions, I contract back, and I hold back, and I stop singing basically also. And then I feel something that I couldn't name at that time, but it was something like a self-betrayal. Something where I know that I'm betraying a deep desire, that I want to sing actually, and I want to express myself more vividly. I wanna express my emotions. I think it has got to do with this feminine qualities. Like I wanted to express melancholia and other like emotions which were more fragile, which were not allowed to me as a teenage boy, like to express. And yeah, like this journey took me actually another 20 years until I finally, at the age of 36, started to go to singing circles. Because that was already a time where I was really connected to yoga, and during yoga classes and some like yoga workshops and so on, I started to chant, and I felt like, yeah, I like that. And again, it was in this like more non-judgmental space, and I started to go to yogic singing circles, and I loved it. And then I booked myself into a retreat by Kevin James. Yeah, this it was a very special experience. I knew like, okay, I want to invest more into my voice and into singing, and music is just really just genuinely joyful to me, like to be in a space with other people where I can be free of my fears and sing, a place where I have allowance to sing. Just this is so valuable, you know, because what are the alternatives? The alternatives is karaoke bar. Karaoke bar is like, yeah, you have to get pissed, and then you can sing, and it's still kind of judgmental, because if you're on stage and you really like fuck it up, then people might laugh at you or something, you know. But in this space, it's really it's not about your performance anymore. It's about the experience.
I mean, I must say that was, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that was my experience when we were in a singing circle in Ubud. It was for the first time where I was in contact with myself exactly as it was. And everything was welcomed. And I think, I mean, even to this day, I'm kind of still longing for a similar experience. Like that evening, we were in our friend's house, and this is something that for me, I mean, I'm still feel like I haven't started my journey with the voice. It's kind of it's itching under the surface, but I know it's becoming a place where I think I need to do something about this. But I know exactly what you're talking about, is coming into a space where the voice is not shamed, no matter what it is.
Yeah, yeah. That is definitely a wonderful space where the transformational journey can at least start to really
start
to unfold. It needs this non-judgmental space because it's so vulnerable. The voice is so vulnerable that it needs a nourishing space to start to prosper, especially when it was covered with a lot of like shame and fear and so on. Some other people, maybe they're lucky enough to start to go to some, let's say, even more judgmental singing classes at an early age, and then they get really good at it, and then they get positive feedback, and then they already get into the habit of showing themselves more with the voice. But for most people, the voice, and especially singing, is kind of like a taboo zone. And most people, like for example, like my clients which are more like from the business arena, I think like 95% of them, they would say, oh no, I can't sing. I have no voice at all. It's quite a belief, huh?
Yes.
Like when you're looking into indigenous tribes, everybody is singing, everybody. And suddenly we are living in a place, in a society where 95% of people, they say, me, absolutely not. And so this is a level of taboo which has been created around the voice, or taboo is maybe not the right word. It's a performance judgment that is being put on the voice.
It's another violation, I think.
Another violation.
It's violation.
It's a tremendous violation to judge the singing expression of the voice in a way that people do not dare to show themselves unless they have a musical full-fledged education or whatever that is, and there are similar violations, just also to say that to dancing and to sexuality. I think like I would call them the three magical gifts that were given to us. Like it's like healthy pleasure for free, like these are the three, and all three are kind of shamed in some way, and are a source of massive fears that we're having around movement. Is probably like dance is probably from those three the one that is, I don't even know if that's correct, but maybe probably the most comfortable. Like people, they don't feel so naked and raw if they are dancing. But I also, especially now talking about men, there are a lot of men who, like, without having a beer, they cannot dance.
Yeah.
They would never dance.
Or without knowing the steps.
Or without knowing the steps, exactly. But like this, what for me had at some stage become normality to go to this thing called ecstatic dance, which is a sober, conscious movement meditation, which can be very wild. Like you would like show everything in your movement. This is for most people on this planet an unthinkable act. You could never do that, and similar contractions, unfortunately, we have around nakedness, around sexuality, around singing. And fortunately, I can say that I feel that there is an awakening, like just by the number of singing circles and voice liberation, voice activation, vocal empowerment workshops that I'm seeing happening, and online courses and so on. There is an awakening back to our basic right to sing.
To sing, yes.
Yeah, we have a basic right to sing. We have a basic
Talking
right to
about the basic right to sing, would you mind singing something for us?
I would love to. Yeah, yeah. I think I will. I was saying it's still a vulnerable space, especially when it's in a setup like
Yes.
that. You know, it's also it's different from like when we're having a singing circle and we are together. I feel even like this has been quite a process for me to like music and screen. Like when
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sharing like music on screen, like there is a barrier where the sound really like this richness of sound doesn't arrive there undistractedly, and also like singing together in an online space is a huge challenge, like many musicians are still working on, because sometimes the sound is delayed by half a second, and so if you would try to sing with me, what I hear from you is not fully in sync with what I'm singing, and things like that. So I'm just saying it's a vulnerable journey, but I'm happy to share something with you. And
well, we can make it reciprocal. So I would hear a little bit of you, and I'll try to do a little bit of
oh, beautiful, beautiful. That is a very nice suggestion. That gives me even more confidence to do so. And you see, like also in music, different types of songs, they of course hold different energies. There are some energies, some mantras or some songs which have like this like warrior Shiva, strong energies, masculine energies, and they are beautiful when if you want to like activate this energy in you. So that is a magical thing about mantra. You can use the energy and the rhythm and the words also as a programming tool, as a self-programming tool. So that's an amazing tool, really, that we're having. And then there are also more feminine songs. So I just spontaneously now probably choose the most feminine song that I'm having right now in my repertoire, and it's my own song, so which it makes it a little bit more vulnerable, you and I guess. And it's Persian. So before I play it, I want to say a little bit something about the meaning. So the song is called Manoto, and Manoto means me and you. And it's a poem from Rumi, and it's a poem about an encounter between two humans beyond the concept of you and me. So in the in the main part, in the chorus, it says Manoto bi Manoto Jam Shavim Asarezor, which means you and me, but without you and me, let's gather in ecstasy.
Oh, wow.
And so yeah, if you like, I can share the full translation with you later on.
We will publish that on the page.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. خانکندم که نشینی در ایوان من و تو برا نشابه دو صورت به یک جان من و تو خوش و فارغ ز خرافات ای پریشان
Oh, it just feels like talking after this is unnecessary.
There is a place for everything.
Yes.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to sing. I was already like observing like some like shy forces to like definitely not like offering it by myself, you know. It's so I really needed that invitation. Like I wouldn't have claimed the space to say I want to share a song, you know.
No, that I think we can meet people in different ways, and sharing this kind of things is a way to meet you. So I think it was a very important thing.
I want to also give a shout out to Sherwin, who you also know, because he inspired me to look into Rumi poems and connect me with the Persian roots, with my ancestral roots, and make my own mantra with that. So I really also owe him some gratitude for planting the seeds for this song, basically.
just before you mentioned that it was a Persian song, I actually had this thought that the two men that I know that are very good at embodying the masculine and the feminine are you and Shervin, and you're both Persian. And then I thought of Rumi, and I thought that there is something in that soil which allows for these energies to come together. I mean, it's also, I don't know of many Western men who embody that as well as a very strong masculine. So it's really beautiful to actually observe that and to see it in both of you. So it was incredible to hear that tonight, because in the podcast, which will be published maybe even before yours, I think, it will be Shervin, and he started with a Persian song as well.
Oh, beautiful. People start to get curious. I was like, what is this going on? Like, why does she invite one Persian singer after the other?
Exactly. So I was thinking about this, and I think I will align them in a way that these will come very close together. I promised a song, so I don't want to escape that. So it will be very short, and it's the title is "I Will Sing What My Heart Knows." So it will be "Pjevat ću vam što mi srce zna, jesme sa svih strana planina. Čujte me, ljubavi sam žena, jer je pjesma jedna nama suđena. Naj, naj, na, na, naj, na, na, naj, naj, na, na, naj, 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 na, na, naj, na, na, It's a very short thing, but it says it's about.
That was so sweet.
Listen,
thank you.
Listen to me. I am, I would say, desiring love. It's not the exact translation, and I'm doing it through the song. So I really love, and this is from my region, so from Balkans.
Okay, what's your connection to this song, if I may ask? Like, where did you?
I mean, it's a song that is sang by a Balkan traditional singer, and it says she's singing the songs from all the sides of the mountains. So there, in this song, there are so many things that talk to me, in the sense that it says, when it says "Čujte me, ljubavi sam žedna," it's just listen. I'm here for love. And it's this sentence that really, when I storytell this song, it's storytelling of love, basically. So that's how I see it. Yeah.
So we were both singing love songs.
Yes.
The Kafkaesque people at some stage, they also get it, huh?
Exactly. I'm curious on the feedback on the podcast. I hope there will be more resonance.
Yeah. It's very interesting, the feeling of the song. The Balkan is kind of like the transition place between the Orient and the Occident. Yes. And I could feel definitely like some influences which reminded me more like to Persian music, actually, also to traditional ballads from that region. I had the same feeling, and when I was in Greece, I spent a bit more time in Greece. And this song reminded me of some like Greek traditional songs also, which have the same qualities, kind of a bit oriental also.
Definitely. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
beauty of living in Serbia, I would say. It's a clash or a mixture, depends who takes it, of cultures. And honestly, when I went out of Serbia, I almost lost my national identity, because I realized the whole region is bathed in these kind of influences. And it's really beautiful, because it's a place where you can either have the harmony or a deep split. And what you get of those depends how you take the responsibility in your life, in a way. So it is quite an interesting area to be part of and to grow up from. So I'm thinking of now wrapping up, because I feel after the song, as I said, words are not really necessary. So, although I would have so many more things, so maybe in 5 or 10 years' time, we could repeat this. But I would like to ask you the rapid fire questions now. And one is, what is a book, a present, or an idea that you like to gift to people the most?
I think it would be a guitar.
Ah, okay.
Yes. A guitar for children, for teenagers. Just each house should have a guitar, and it should be visible and accessible. Guitar.
Okay. I love, honestly, the rapid fire questions are really beautiful to me. They get the idiosyncrasy of people's out, and it's beautiful to see how people respond. What is an absurd thing about you that not many people know about?
Yeah. Okay, I'm a weather forecast addicted person. I love to scroll through multiple cities in my weather app multiple times a day, or at least once a day. I have like this whole spectrum of places, like the coldest places in Siberia, hot places in the desert, all the places where I have been, and I check the weather like with great passion.
Wow. So cool. Okay. What kind of compliments, and if, do you like to receive?
I love to receive compliments around my being. I like to be reminded of my kindness. I like to be reminded also like when people connect with my music, and I receive authentic feedback that I could touch their heart with my voice or with my music. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to me. But generally, like I want people to feel my love. So I love feedback which is more around the feminine qualities that I have been cultivating throughout the years. Yeah.
Nice. And what are some things that have become more and which have become less important to you as you have gotten older?
Less important, I would say, yeah, prestige, status, what people think of me, being constantly sexually successful and having a lot of partners and stuff like that. Like I'm right now at a place where I can totally be fine. For me, most important is that I'm true to myself. And yeah, I don't need that to feel good anymore. I don't need any type of like success to feel good. What has become more important is authenticity. Like I'm more and more in a space where my inner voice constantly would give me a feedback about my level of alignment with myself, with my truth, with my authenticity. and gives me signals of like, hey, this is this is not it in terms of relationships or things that I endeavors. Like if anything is not in line, authenticity has become tremendously important for me. Creativity has become tremendously more important. Nature has become more important in my life. Yeah.
So is there anything we haven't mentioned, or is there a question you would like to ask yourself and no one has asked you, but you really have a burning desire to share?
I think there are 1,000 questions that we have maybe not touched upon, but at the same time, I also feel quite complete, to be honest. So honestly, I don't feel that there is a urge right now to go into a field.
So
Yeah,
I would then like to thank you. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's funny because this is what you want to say, and after I said there's nothing else I want to go into,
Okay.
the only impulse that came was gratitude. It was just to not forget that we could be dying tomorrow. It sounds pathetic a little bit. It sounds a little bit cheesy, but it's really true. Like I'm right now in a process where I'm facing my mortality. There are also meditations around that, to just like, let's not trick ourselves and think that we are living forever and be grateful for each day that we're having, that we can do beautiful things like we just have done.
Wow. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think I would stop here with an immense gratitude.
Beautiful. Thank you, Alex.
You have just heard the story of Rouzbeh Tavakkoli, a multi-passionate explorer of human nature and ever-growing wisdom seeker with a background in organizational psychology, international management, and existential coaching. He teaches holistic yoga, hosts music ceremonies, and facilitates workshops and retreats with a focus on entrepreneurship, self-mastery, and authentic self-expression. If you want to connect to him and get to know more about his work, you can reach him on his webpage www.rouzbehtavakkoli.com. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and if you like, please share and subscribe so these stories can reach more people.